Fascinating things you're wrong about the Old West. So it's not surprising if your impression of the Old West was a place filled with cowboys, gunslingers, sheriffs, and saloons. But perhaps there's something more behind that, right? Well, although there were some truths in most Old West stereotype movies, the real Old West was quite different from what you know. You'll discover these fascinating facts, and at the end of this video, you'll find out why in the Old West, women could be more badass than men. Then without further ado, let's begin. Well, yes, people back then do enjoy cheap liquor in saloons. After a tiring day in the fields or in the mines, frontiermen would walk through saloons' doors and order a shot of whiskey. But if you think that it tastes good, then, sorry to say, that it's not uncommon for first-timers to almost vomit. Of course, whiskey back then tasted horrible, and they even say it tasted like gasoline. Also, though guns back then were strictly prohibited, the Old West was really violent, more than you can imagine. And in Old West movies that featured train robberies and shootouts, compared to what really happened, still looked modest. Since, way back then, people staying in the infamous Dodge City had a 1 in 61 chance of getting murdered. Not even the most violent city in the world at present was as deadly as the Old West Dodge City. Although most dime novels described how people back then lived in a very impoverished situation, especially the people living in mining boom towns that look greasy and haggard in this photo. However, did you know that these guys were actually having a more lavish lifestyle than what people in Silicon Valley had? Yes, living in mining towns back there was expensive. Actually, a single egg would cost as much as $3, around $105 today. Then a pound of butter would cost $20, or $700 today. And shovels sold for $36, a whopping $1,259 today. Here's quite an unpleasant fact. Though cowboys were glamorized as heroes and significant icon of Old West folklore, the record tells the opposite. During that time, especially in Arizona, cowboy exactly meant criminal. And one newspaper even quoted that cowboys were the most reckless class of outlaws, even infinitely worse than the ordinary one. If you're familiar with the Old West, then you must have heard of the Wild West show. But far from their fancy gunplay and dramatic recreations, the indoor stage plays that Buffalo Bill's crew performed were really awful. Well, it's expected since none of them were experienced actors, and they even had no proper scripts. It was said that their acting was so bad that the audience would just laugh along with it. Women were treated differently in the Old West. To be honest, it was quite a men's world back then. Compared to men, there were very few working opportunities for them. And worse, even their rights to own properties were at loose ends. But despite that, it didn't stop Alice Ivers Tubbs, better known as Poker Alice. It was said that she had won around $250,000 in gambling. Also, Alice was educated, well-dressed, smoked cigars, and carried a .38 revolver. And did you know she even shot and killed a man who's rampaging in her saloon, then was later acquitted? Indeed, perhaps she's one of the most badass women in the Old West. You've just discovered the fascinating things you're wrong about the Old West. And now click this and discover the best 10 Old West movies.